very much. Fine. So we're on we're on Nun Vav Amud Aleph, and we finished Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. That was the Mishnah, and we came out after many different opinions that Allah Lamaisek Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah that the woman only gets Tosefes Ksuba only after Nesuin. That was the Machlokes. Everybody holds that she gets the Mana Masayim even from her Erisin, but the question was about the Tosefes, and the Gemara passed like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah that she doesn't get Tosefes only after Nesuin. The Gemara figured out just before that everybody holds you go with Umdana. It could be both sides. Hold you go. Well, what is the Umdana? What does he mean to do it? Does he do it the Chibas Erisin or only the Chibas Nesuin? It passed like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Chibas Nesuin. The Gemara starts. Boy Robin. Nichnas al chuppah v'lo nivala mahu. Chibas chuppah kona or chibas bia kona. When we say Nesuin, so we had before that Hagdara, the definition of Nesuin means coming into his house. That's called chuppah. Nowadays it's called the chuppah the canopy, but that's not dafka the Hagdara of chuppah. Chuppah means where the couple is going to live, coming home. Nowadays they don't have a home now. Nowadays they don't make the chasana by the home, they make it by the ulam. So they use the canopy or the cheder yichud, and they make that to be the domain of the husband, the chassan, and he's bringing her into his domain. That's called chuppah. But the real chuppah means bringing her home to his domain. That's called chuppah. So the question is, we had before the issue of kinyan chuppah. Does it happen even without nivola, even without having relations? Just the fact that she came into her home, his home, that's already called chuppah. Here the Gemara must know about Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. This new halacha, this is telling his das. This depends on what he meant. He meant to give her to Tosefes Ksuba because of Nesuin. What does Nesuin? What does he mean to say? The Nesuin of just coming into the home, chibas chuppah, or dafka if they have relations. So now we're zooming in even deeper to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Before the question was according to Rabbanan, even Erisin. That's enough. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says no, Nesuin. Now we want to know within the Nesuin, what does he mean to say? Coming into his house, even that's not enough. Only if they had relations. It means the case would be that if he brought her into his house and then he died, or he divorced, or whatever it would be, does she get to Tosefes Ksuba? Maybe chibas chuppah is enough. Or no, after chibas bia, till they had relations, he doesn't mean to give the Tosefes. Tashma, the Tani of Yosef, Shalokas, Rav said the Brisa, which is a little different than our Mishnah, terminology a little different. Shalokas of la ella al chibas laila rishon. Our Mishnah used the term Shalokas of la ella al dats lakonsa. Only the knisa. Knisa means bringing her in, but we want to know what that means. Does bringing her in mean to his home, or it means actual relations? So this Brisa says a little different term that we could try to figure out which one it means. Because here he calls it the chibah of the first night. So what is the first night? Of the two choices, coming home or having relations? The Gemara is going to say that having relations doesn't have to be the first night. Coming home, they come home the first night. After the wedding, they come home. But relations could be the first night, could be the second night, could be a couple nights later. It doesn't have to be after the first night. That's another way to say the chuppah, coming home. That's called the first night. Is it only the first night? It doesn't have to be. The first time they had relations could be a different night. It doesn't have to be the first night. So the word wants to prove that it means chibas chuppah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah meant to say coming in to the home. That's what gives her the Tosefes Ksuba. He didn't mean after relations. He meant coming home. But tomorrow is a difficulty with that also. Did they come home at night? Nowadays, that's how it is because the whole wedding is at night. But they used to have daytime weddings. That's how we had It talks about the daytime. The normal wedding was in the daytime, so they could have come home in the daytime also. Why does he call chuppah dafka in the nighttime? If he said that, it means bia. We had a problem with the word rishon, and now read the first. And chuppah makes sense. The first day, the first night. But what is day night? And the Gemara says, "Yasing on me, that word, that kasha is difficult on you also." Second white line, is it impossible to have relations in the daytime? It's technically possible to have relations in the daytime also. It is true that you're not supposed to have relations in daylight. But if you make the room dark, if you darken the room by yourself, or you darken the room, it's mutter to have relations in the daytime also. So that kasha will be difficult anyway. Why it says the first night? That's good if you say chuppah, not good if you say relations. But if the fact that it says night is difficult either way. But the Gemara says no, that wouldn't be difficult. No, hollow kasha. It would. The it's normal, the regular way. It's telling us the regular way of the land. The regular way is to have relations at night, even though it's mutter in a dark room, but that's not the regular way. So we're telling you the normal way is to have relations even at night. It seems to say that even though it's mutter with a by itself, but it's more normal dafka at night. Okay, so that would be the reason why I would say night, if it means relations. But if it means coming home, so why dafka at night? Alachupa kasha. So if you want to say that Bryson means to say coming home, so is that dafka in the night, or it could be in daytime just as much. Moshe says no, that's not difficult.
Where's the chuppah kasha?
We're trying to figure out when it says these words. It says in the Brisa, what does that mean? The first night, the fact that he got the first night with her. So what does that mean? So we're saying that it doesn't mean relations because not after the first night. But if it means chuppah, then it makes sense. But the more is asking, it doesn't make sense.
Chuppah means what?
Chuppah means coming home.
Oh, coming home.
The chuppah means the place where they're going to live. That's called chuppah. And then it makes sense that it's the first. The first because the relations could be the second, third, fourth.
So it's still a kasha if it means.
If it means chuppah, then why does it say Laila? They don't come to home at night. They can come home in the daytime also. That a day wedding, and then they finish that before Shkia, they come home. So why does it have to do with the night? So the Gemara says no, that's not difficult either. It's just another way of saying that the chuppah coming home is for the purpose of having relations. So it's not a problem they call the first night. But if it would mean relations, then there's no reason why you say the first night. It's not after the first night. The chuppah is the first day, first night. Usually it's the night, but for the purpose of the night. But to say relations, it wouldn't make sense that it would say the first because it's not after the first night. It could be afterwards also. So therefore, the Gemara comes out that Rabbi Elazar Azariah says that he gives a Tosefes Ksuba for the Nesuin. It means the chuppah. It doesn't have to mean the relations. If they did have chuppah, she came home with him. Even though they didn't have relations, it's already, she's the zocha in the Tosefes Ksuba. And the one's happy with that. That seems to be the answer. Next question. Boy Rabashi. We're now on the whatever 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th white line. Boy Rabashi. Okay, we're going now. We finished. Home is ready enough to make her a nesua as far as the subject of the Tosefes Ksuba. But now she became a nida, and she's not even able to stay with to have bia, right? To have a bia, which means that it's I guess to say that she was prayers nida before she came into the chuppah. That's the question. Even though chuppah is enough, not having relations, even the chuppah alone is enough to make her nesua that she gets the Tosefes Ksuba. Maybe that's only if it's a kind of a chuppah which is able, it has the ability to make bia. But if it's a chuppah that they can't have relations because she's a nida, maybe that's also not enough. It has to be chibas chuppah abuya bia, and that the Gemara says we don't know. Very interesting that there's an issue about chuppas nida. Is there any problem having a chuppas nida? Of course, it's not practical if the woman is if the kala is a nida, so then that makes complications. They can't have yichud. They can't be together by themselves. They'll have to have somebody, a kid or something like that. Then it comes out very uncomfortable sometimes or difficult. But halachically, is there any difference if there's a chuppas nida or not? So there's a Rambam that says that chuppas, the Gemara that says chuppas and any royal labia, even is referring to the point about the kinyan chuppah. The kinyan chuppah has to be a chuppah royal labia. Most Rishonim don't learn that. Most Rishonim say that our Gemara is just talking about very specific, zooming in on our subject. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says one that she get Tosefes Ksuba with the chibas chuppah, and then there's a question: how about if it's a chuppah and a royal labia? Did he mean to give her Tosefes Ksuba even for such a kind of a chuppah or not? That's what the Gemara says take you. But as far as everything else, whatever is considered an asua, she's considered an asua when she comes into his home, even before they had relations. That the Gemara is not talking about. It's not the subject over here. That's the subject someplace else. The Gemara doesn't talk about royal labia. So therefore, most Rishonim say that there's no halachic implication about having a chuppas nida. If she's a chuppas and a royal labia, it doesn't take away from the kinyan of chuppah in any way. Just in our Gemara, there's a question of Elazar ben Azariah, Tosefes Ksuba, and therefore it's a very focused, limited Gemara. It doesn't have any other ramifications. It does happen. It does happen, right? And there's no halachic implications. There are halachic implications that right. So then there's and there's no reason to. It's not. They do try to. They just get a kid to sleep over with them, and they're not allowed to have relations. It's also to have yichud. Of course, can't have relations. She's a nida, but they can't be yichud either until they have relations the first time. Till she had relations one time. I mean, again, if they had relations one time, a regular woman is a nida, no problem. A person stays with his wife even though she's a nida. he doesn't go out of the room, go out of the house because she's a nida, right? The woman, there's no issa yichud. There's no yichud with the nida, but it's only after they have relations one time. Then he's calmed down. But the first time they never had relations, so then there's issa yichud, even though they're married and she's only a nida. What's the problem?
You're saying
Until they had relations one time.
they can never have relations one time. If
After right, she become Torah,
and then what happens?
and then they had
They don't get a
relations.
kid.
Right? Then they tell the kid to go home. Right. But then they tell the kid to go home. You can leave. The kid leaves. And they have yichud. But if she becomes a nida again without having relations, they'll have to call the kid back again.
Okay.
They have to have relations one time, and then if she becomes a nida, they have no issa yichud.
They just wait for it to go to the
And have relations, and then they don't have. It doesn't make a difference when she comes nida next time.
As I just got, there could be a problem, let's say, for whatever, it's a young couple, they weren't Matzliach.
So yeah, so
And they
then
have to get a kid for a week.
right,
But
2
more
weeks.
than
Yeah,
2
yeah,
weeks.
yeah,
It's very
problem.
hard, it's
Yeah,
a problem.
problem, right? So that if they
Sometimes
didn't
you
have,
young couples are not Matzliach.
they're not able to have relations. They weren't successful having relations, and then she becomes a nida. Then she's a nida for 2 weeks.
Then she becomes a
Nowadays they use the pill, so therefore they try to have relations at least one time, and they'll use the pill till they're successful. Okay, but the point is that Gemara here is a very big condition around them. The Pasuk Shadran was only talking about no. So everyone's what we talked about just now is about nida. That's true. That if she's a nida, she can't have yichud. That's true, and there'll be a technical difficulty that they have to have somebody there with them. But is there any difficulty? Is there any deficiency in the chuppah? The fact that it was not royal labia? So that the Gemara doesn't say. The Gemara is talking about this particular point that Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Lezer says, Rabbi Azari says she doesn't get the Sefer Ksuba until after she had a chuppah. Is that a chuppah royal labia or not? Okay, very specific. But the Rambam takes this Gemara to say that maybe it's not kona. The chuppah is not kona as far as other halachas of chuppah, Yorsha, Metamila, which also it doesn't make such a difference. They can wait until she'll become Torah eventually. Then it'll be the chuppah. The chuppah could be 2 weeks later also. But that the Rambam does say that our Gemara also applies to other halachas of chuppah, which is a chiddush. The Pasuk Pshat our Gemara is very specific only about this chuppah, which is going to make her get the Sefer Ksuba. That the Gemara doesn't know if it's a chuppah shena roy labia. Okay, next subject. The Mishnah said, Rabbi Yehuda Omer. What's a kosvin l'bsula? There's a way of being mochel l'ksuba. Rabbi Yehuda says that he writes for a regular ksuba, 200, and she writes back a receipt. I got 100. We spoke about if she could write back a receipt. I got the whole thing that the Malach Shlomo spoke about in the Mishnah. But I didn't see that they talk about it more. But let's just say what it says. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he writes her a ksuba for 200, and she writes back if she wants to. I received 100, and it's fine. The Rebbe says you can't do that. And if she has less than the 200 ksuba, that's like bilas nus. So the Gemara wants to know, it sounds like she writes a receipt over here, right? He writes a ksuba and she writes a receipt. And the Gemara is going to say that Bida holds usually they don't write receipts. Usually, if there's a reason to write a receipt, you just tear up the star. You tear up the star, and the one that the Malva has. The Malva has a document that you owe me money, and the Loba one is paying and he wants a receipt. So, and he wants to tear up the star. And the Malva says, I'll give you a receipt. I'll keep the star. So that's the question if you can write a receipt or not. Usually it happens when the Malva says, I lost the star. The Malva says, you lost the star. No, maybe you have it, then you're going to demand me again. So the Malva says, take your receipt. He says, I don't want a receipt. I lose my receipts.
Oh, I lose my receipts.
I lose my receipts. And then you're going to come after a year and say, you owe me money. And where's the receipt? I'm not that kind of guy that I can keep my receipts. So I'm not going to pay you until you give me back the contract. That's the issue about is that do we force the lover to write to accept a receipt? And here it says here in the Mishnah that the woman is writing a receipt, which we'll see right away that'll be a simple terrorist, but the Gemara is starting that in our Mishnah view is telling the woman to write a receipt. She wants to be mochel, so he tells her to write a receipt. You write the husband writes the ksuba 200 and she writes the receipt for 100. And Rabbi Yehuda, we're going to see in other places that he doesn't hold the receipts. For some Rabbi Yehuda, Kosman Shover, the word Shover means a receipt. Do you write a Shover? But no, Mishapar Mitzvah Shover. Here's the case where the Mishnah is similar to our Mishnah. That is, he paid back partially. There was a loan of $200 and he paid back 100. And the Malva has the star of 200 and the Lova is paying back 100. What do you do now? He can't keep the star of 200. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Yachlef. Rabbi Yehuda says, tear up the old star and write a new star of 100. Or else it seems that the Lova doesn't have to accept the Shover. Yachlef means change the star. Before it was a star of 200, now make it a star of 1. Rashi points out that you're losing out because the Malva still now had a star that was from 2 months ago. It was an old star, and the shibudim is from that date. And now that you're going to tear it up and write a new star, that's from this date. That's not so simple. The Malv is losing out on this. But he doesn't, but the Loba says, I don't want to accept the shover. I don't want a receipt. I'm going to lose a receipt. You're going to say, I owe you 200. If you're saying, the Malva can keep the star of 200, and he tells the Loba, I'll give you a receipt, then you keep the receipt. So that's the Gemara's kasha. Here, Yehuda also says about a receipt in armor, and there Yehuda didn't agree to a receipt. He said, change the star. Gemara's two to on this, Rabbi Yemi and Abaye. In our Mishnah, where Yehuda says to write a receipt, it's not another receipt. It's a receipt in the contract. Means in the ksuba, means if you write on the document, paid half, you have a receipt that says I owe you 200. And it also, and then in the receipt itself, in the document itself, it says, and I have received 100. Then there's no question about the receipt. The receipt that the Loba has to hold on to, that's dangerous. The Loba says I might lose it. But if you put the receipt onto the document that you stamp it, you say that's been paid half, then the Loba is not nervous, because whenever you're going to come with the document, you're holding on to the chauffeur for me. Whenever you're going to come with the document, it's always going to have a built-in receipt that half of it has been paid. That's what Avida Bayas means. Avida Bayas only means that you tell the woman to write the receipt in the ksuba. Then it's no chash. But Avida otherwise wouldn't say to write a receipt. Abaye Omar is no cash in the first place. I feel the time of You don't have to say that's the case over here. You tell the woman if she wants to, she can write a receipt. Over there, we understand why Ravida says don't write a receipt. Maybe he's going to pay, and then he's going to lose the receipt, and the Malva is going to take out the contract, the document, and he's going to collect the second time. It's a problem. Lova says I don't want that. But Rashi says that's the way you read it. Did he give her did he give her money? Doesn't give money that she's going to say I got it already. She's saying it on her own. She's being mochel. She tells them. The receipt, I won't give you. If he keeps on to the receipt, that's fine. If not, then it's his own loss. Means it's simple terrorist. It's very simple. In the case where there's a loba that he paid back the money, and then he's scared to hold on to the receipt, he might lose it. So he tells him, I'm not going to give you the money and get a receipt. I might lose the receipt, and you're going to come a second time. Here, the husband really owes the ksuba. The woman of her good free will is saying, "I'll be mochel you have," and then he says, "Maybe I'm going to lose the receipt." Okay, if she loses it, it's your problem. I'm being mochel it. I don't have to be mochel it. I'm being mochel it. You're telling me I shouldn't write a shover. What do you want? If you don't want the shover, so don't take it. And say only 200. So it's Pasha the Teres. Abai is a Pasha the Teres. And the Gemara can ask, why does the Rabbi Yirmiyah not say Abai is Teres? The reason why Abai doesn't say Rabbi Yirmiyah is Teres is because it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that Rabbi Yehuda says that she writes into the contract. It doesn't say that. So she's not about the contract. She could write it even if it's not in the contract. Abai is a Pasha the Teres. That here there's no kasha on writing a shover because it's her own free will if she wants to. The answer is Gzera Shovadacha to Shovadalma, that he would have made a Gzera. If you hold, the Yehuda holds usually you don't write a shover, so he doesn't write receipts. The Yehuda says, don't make, if you can make a receipt over here, then they're going to start telling the law he has to accept the receipt also. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yirmiyah holds that Rabbi Yehuda would not have said anything about a receipt, only if you do a built-in receipt. That's how Rabbi Yirmiyah holds that. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you only allow built-in receipts, but don't make other receipts. Because if you can do it over here, by a Mechila case, you're going to do it by a Lova case also. There, the Lova doesn't really have to accept a shover. So this was machlokes. If you, it seems to say just from the number over here, the Vav, it sounds like Pasnak Abuda that you don't force the Lova to accept the receipt. He says, give me the star or a built-in receipt. Also, that's just as good if you make a built-in receipt. But otherwise, the Lova doesn't have to let the Malva keep the star, and he should hold on to the receipt. Okay, the end of that sugya. The next sugya I'm going to explain. According to what I saw that the Ritva says, it makes it, otherwise I didn't understand it. There are two ways how the woman might waive the ksuba. The Amish talks about that he writes the ksuba, gives her a ksuba of 200, and she writes back a shover, as we said, a receipt, either a built-in receipt or another receipt, whatever. That's the way how Yehuda will say to do it. But how about if it's a simple case that she says, you don't have to give me a ksuba, or let's give me 100 before they write the ksuba. Not that he writes 200 and she writes, I got 100 already. That's like a fancy way of doing it. Why not do it simple? She says, I'm satisfied.
Just with 100.
Yeah, I'm open. And then he writes a ksuba of 100. Yeah. Why not do it that way? So the Gemara is like that the Mishnah doesn't say that. Time of the Kasvale, only if she wrote means, I'm saying there was shot. In the words, I wouldn't have seen it too much. It's a little bit different in the words, but the Gemara is easier to understand that way. only if she wrote. What does she write? She wrote that I received 100. He writes her 200. Then she writes back, I got 100. Aval pelo. If it would have been verbal that she says I'm mochel and just give me a ksuba of 100, that wouldn't be acceptable. And that wouldn't be considered a mechila. That wouldn't be considered that she waived the ksuba. Here, she gave a receipt. She said, I received it. That's called that's a good way to do it. But if she would have just verbally said, just give me a ksuba of 100 is good enough, that wouldn't have been good enough. It wouldn't have been a good mechila. And why not? The question is, if you're allowed to make a tanai to waive something that the Torah says. Torah says you obligated something. Can you make a tanai to how do you say not to make yourself not obligated, to pater yourself? How do you say pater?
Exempt.
To exempt yourself. So there's a machlokes coming up. If in a law that the Torah says, if you're allowed to exempt yourself, you make a condition. I'm doing this. The Torah says I have to do something. I'm saying that between me and you, I'm not going to do it. So the Tanya, a person marries a woman on condition that I shouldn't have obligations to you of share ksus. The Torah says you have share, you have to do it. Lo you grew up. And share means we said
Share is something that share kesus or share is something.
Share is 1, ksus is 2, own is 3. This pasuk in the Torah. Share ksus v'ona.
What is share?
Share ksus v'ona. So we had machlokas before if share means mazonos or it means what was the other choice that it means ona maybe it means relations or intimacy. And ksus means clothing. The husband has to give her clothing. Ona, the pasuk pshat is that ona means relations. All the obligations that a husband has to a wife. We'll take it simple that share means mazonos. He has to give her food. Ksus means clothing, and also he has to have relations. That's the obligations of a husband to a wife. And he made a marriage on the condition that I should be exempt from these things. So it doesn't work. Can he make kedushin? And she agreed. She agreed. So Harei says to know batel doesn't work. It's a marriage. Marriage is a marriage. They're married, but unconditional means that then he is chayiv. He comes the next day. He says, I'm exempt. The Rav says, no, you're not exempt. But I said I'm exempt, and she said it's okay. No, it doesn't make a difference. That's what Meir. How does it go? You can make a condition of what the Torah says you have to do, even if both of you agree. It's like someone's going to say, I'll make a loan on the condition that I'm going to charge interest. You can't do that. Torah says don't. So but if it's only a money issue, you could. In this case of share ksus owner, there are two money issues. The share, the mazonos is money, and the ksus is money. The owner is not. The owner is something that has to do with the person, personal. So monetary things you could be mochel, but personal things you can't. And what does it mean? That here Rashi doesn't explain to other places. He says that's Sarah the Gufa, that would be physical or personal pain, and that she's not mochel. Means Mitzad the Torah, you could be mochel things that you could be mochel, that's not a problem. But here she's not mochel things that are personal. And therefore, even if then she decides that she's not mochel anymore, she tells the husband, I want relations, and he says you were mochel, everybody holds, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, that mechila did not take effect. And he is chayiv. But anyway, what do we want? That in anything which is monetary, Rabbi Yehuda holds that he could make a tanai to exempt himself. So that's the kasha here. Ksuba is monetary. So how come in our Mishnah, the way that Rabbi Yehuda said how they can get out of the ksuba 200 is by he says a ksuba 200 and she says I accepted 100, fancy way that she says his kabalti that I received it. Let her just say that I'm offering you the half the ksuba. It's Dav Shabbat because Rabbi Yehuda, or maybe we understand can't. They're basically saying in the Mishnah also you can't do it. But Rabbi Yehuda that says you could do it. Why? That's a fancy way that he gives it a ksuba of 200 and then she says his kabalti. Just say, let us tell him half the ksuba is fine. Half is good enough. The Gemara answers Rabbi Yehuda ksuba rabbanan. That you're right. The regularly even a davar shel Torah also, even a davar Torah also, if it's a monetary issue, he could be mochel. But here, things that are rabbanon, they made it more humble. They made it's counterintuitive that it's only rabbanon should be more lenient. But it's the opposite. Sometimes rabbanons have to become reinforced more because people are mezalzel and rabbanons, so sometimes they need more reinforcement. So that's what he says, that he holds tubas rabbanon, and therefore the chachamim reinforced it more than the raisa. In order people shouldn't be mezalzel. So here he says that you cannot make a tanai to be mochel the ksuba. The only way you can do it is the fancy way. That he gives her a ksuba, he gives her a contract, says I'm chayiv to you 200, then she gives him a receipt for 100. That you could do. But to say that I waived the half the ksuba, that even according to you cannot do it because we have to reinforce the rabbanans more than the raisa, and therefore even though you could be mochel of the raisa money, like sharing ksus, but you can't be mochel ksuba. Make sense?
Mhm.
The Marza Kasha that Kasha Rabbi Yehuda, that we find that the other things are Rabbanan, over there Rabbi Yehuda says that you could be mochel. This issue, we just said that the Rabbanan, you have to make a reinforcement even more than the rice, and you can't be mochel it, we find differently. How we pay us.
Isn't that like Kiddush Rabbah?
Like
On
what?
Shabbos, on Shabbos, Kiddush Rabbah.
Yeah, Kiddush Rabbah, yeah.
I thought it was, the reason it was called Kiddush Rabbah is because it's the Rabbanan and they wanted to.
Over there, not that it's making a
Like
chizik,
the
it's just
great Kiddush, in other words,
uh-huh.
it's not Diraisa, but don't.
the way the Gemara says it is just like called the Sagi Noah. It's like a euphemism, is that the word? They
It's
call
a
it the opposite.
euphemism.
Is that
The opposite of what it
opposite of what they really
is.
mean?
Oh, it's not because of, I thought it was this principle.
Not to make a chizik, it's just chizik would be like more by
I thought
halachos
people
to reinforce it.
Ramazo.
They call it like the opposite because it's really very small kiddush. They call it Kiddush Rabbah means a big kiddush.
Yeah,
It's not a big kiddush, it's just by Priya Gofen.
yeah.
So why they call it a big kiddush? A euphemism. That's what the Gemara says.
Oh,
That is just a way of talking. That when they say big, it means a little one. So the most conscious is going to be that you find other drabanan which Rabbi Yehuda didn't make any chizuk. All right, pay was drabanan. The halacha that the husband is eligible to get the profits of his wife's estate. So that's drabanan, and we're going to say soon that Rabbi Yehuda holds he could be mochalit. That's what in the word. That's what the Gemara is going to say.
could mochel-
You could, the husband could waive the right to his eligibility, his privilege
payros
to get
of-
the payros of his wife, the payros of, and that's Rabbanan. You said by Rabbanan that Rabbi Yehuda makes a reinforcement, and he also can't just
Yeah.
waive it. I think more is going to ask a kasha, but payros is Rabbanan, and they did not make this reinforcement. I mean, payros, which is only Rabbanan, v'lov the other Rabbanan achizuk. How do you know that? The time later on in the Masechta, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, la'olam u'ochel payros ad sheyichtav lo dinu dvar mainly b'nachasayich u'b'payrosein u'b'payrosein ad olam. That's the Mishnah. Over there it talks about if you mochel payros. How about the payros? How about the next generation of payros? Which means that but usually when you get a profit, so now you have to reinvest the profit to make it also profitable. So that's called payros. You take the payros, you take the profit, whatever the land produced, and you sell that. Let's say it made the crop. So you sell the crop, you harvest the crop, and you sell that, and with that money you buy a piece of land, which in turn is going to make a crop.
Yeah.
That's called payros. So the question is, what do you mochel exactly? So it says that he has rights to the payros, to the next generation of profit, unless you wrote the following: that I have no right, mainly in your property, in their profit, in the profit of their profit forever. That's the only question. That's the technicality of how much you have to, what you have to write exactly. You have to be mefarei the estate, the profits, the profit of the profits. But anyway, it says that you could be mochel. Here it did say till he wrote to her. And the Gemara says that writing Dinu Dvarim means any kind of business. I have no business with your. That's not way of saying I'm wavering. He writes till he writes to her the following. This is the words, right? These words will be written. Dinu Dvarim ainly that'll be the nusach, the text you put into the contract. But anyway, what does it say? That he says, I waived my right to pay.
As opposed to orally saying, like, wait.
And the Gemara says, and the right one, we have to turn a page, and we have established over there that it doesn't, that can mean writing. Kaimalan might say, Omer, that there's no difference if you write it or you say it, it's all the same. That means that he just waves. He doesn't say his kabalti. He doesn't say I received it. He says that I want it. I don't need it. That's a good way to waive a monetary right, and that goes well.
We're saying my kosef.
What does the word kosef mean over there?
Yeah.
Omer.
Oh, Omer. Period. I see.
And what do you see? That it's enough to just waive the rights, and that means that Rabbi holds that you could be mastal al davar shebamama. Since it's only a monetary right that you have, you could say I don't want it. And over there, and the most kasha is it's only Rabbanan. That's the kasha. And by Rabbanan, you say you make a reinforcement, and you say that you cannot just be mochel it. You have to write that I have received it. That is kabalti. So that's the Stephen Rabbi Yehuda. I'm Rabbiya, but all yesh ksuba. Everybody has a ksuba. Every woman has a right to a ksuba. Not every man gets paris because not every wife comes in with an estate. That's a producing estate. So therefore, milsa the shlicha of the rabbanan chizuk, but milsa the lo shlicha of the rabbanan chizuk. Only something which is usual that the rabbanan use it to make a reinforcement. Things that are not so usual, so the rabbanan didn't use that. They didn't make a reinforcement over there. So therefore, that's the answer. That usually Rabbi Yehuda holds a monetary thing you could waive, but if it's rabbanan and it's usual, then they'll make a reinforcement. That's ksuba. So ksuba, they made an exception, and they said that ksuba you cannot be mochel because there needs a reinforcement. That ksuba is important, even though it's rabbanan. But by By the rice, they didn't make a reinforcement like sharing ksus, and by something which is drabbana, which is not usual, they didn't make a reinforcement, and therefore those things you could waive. The Gemara is happy at this point that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the reason why you can't waive ksuba by just saying you don't have to give me the ksuba, you can give me just 100. That's not good enough because also chizik to the brain. The rest in another 5-6 lines, 7 is going to be a side point that you find that Rabbi Yehuda made a chizuk even on something which is not usual. Mamish a side point, nothing to do with our sugya by ksuba. Arei chamorim, the shchichi, v'lav l'rabbanan chizuk. Chamorim means truck drivers, not donkey drivers, that they came with their schora to sell. We had this once before. Where does it say it on the side? We had it, 24. Over there it says a case where people come selling their goods and we don't know if they were ma'aser. We don't know if they tithe. The donkey drivers came into the city with their schora, with their wheat. One of them said, that my produce is not good and my friend's is good. Good either about that it's his yashan is ready, is dried out, it's a better quality. Mine is not tied and my friend's is tied. The question is, do you believe him? Do you believe him on his friends? The Amoritz himself says on himself that mine is tied. You don't trust him, he's Amoritz. But here, is he trusted to testify in somebody else's? So it says, according to Tanakama, you don't trust him because it could be that they're just doing a favor for each other. In this city, I'll sell. They come to the next city, then you'll be testifying for mine. So Tanakama says you don't trust him. Rabbi Yehuda says you trust him. What does the Gemara want from this? So really not exactly the same as our case, but the Gemara wants to say that you should make a chizuk. How come you don't make a chizuk? Rashi says,
what would they make a chizuk that way?
Make a chizuk and say that it shouldn't be believed. Rashi on the second line says, Chamorim gabi demai drabanan. The whole thing is drabanan because with the Rashi you're allowed to trust him. But of the chizuk, the mechash legomlin Rabbi Yehuda. Yehuda doesn't say you reinforce it and don't trust them. Be choshesh that they're doing each other a favor. It doesn't seem to be an exact case. Nothing to do with our exact case about making a chizuk on a rabbanon more than a deraisa. It doesn't seem to be mamash a parallel case. But the way Rashi explains, the Gemara is asking that if Rabbi Yehuda says you have to reinforce the rabbanons, so we should reinforce. It could be that the only reason why I trust them over here is because it's rabbanon. That Rashi wouldn't trust them.
Everybody knows that they took truma.
I'm sorry, true. We're talking about whatever you don't trust Amoritz for. We're talking about the things you don't trust. You don't trust them for Meiser.
For truma because
Okay, so then we're talking about Meiser. Talking about the Meiser part.
Talking about the Meiser part after the truma.
And Amoritz does not believe. And here Yehuda did believe them. And the kasha seems to be that if it will be the Raisa, he wouldn't have believed them. And if it's Rabbanan, you do believe him, you should make a chizuk. You should make a reinforcement and not trust them for the Rabbanans either. It doesn't seem to be an exact parallel. It's not talking about the same subject. But if you saw, it seems in the Gemara that if it will be the Raisa, you also wouldn't have trusted them. You only trust them because it's Rabbanan. And the kasha is that you're saying that the Rabbanan, you make a chizuk. You reinforce the Rabbanans, Yosef Mishal Torah, as long as it's Shchiach. And here it's Shchiach also. It is Shchiach that people come to sell Tvua in the city. So you should make a chizuk and not trust them. Amar Abaye, this Rabbanan is less than other Rabbanans. Regular Rabbanan you reinforce, but this Rabbanan is less. Amar Abaye Vade the Devrayim of the Rabbanan chizuk. Suffolk the Devrayim of the Rabbanan chizuk. There's a Rabbanan, you're right, it's Devrayim, it's Rabbanan. But there's a difference between a Vadai or a Suffolk. Means that the reason why, let's say the case by us, Ksuba. Ksuba is a Vadai Rabbanan. They instituted Ksuba. It's Rabbanan, but it's a definite institution of the Rabbanan. But the whole thing is based on a suffix. Why did the Rabbanan say? Because maybe it wasn't tied. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. So that's lenient more than a regular Rabbanan. And therefore, even though by Rabbanans they do reinforce Rabbanans more than the Torah, but this one, which is only a suffix of the brain, they didn't see necessary to make a reinforcement. Rava Omar, the Demai Kilu. That Demai is also Rabbanah, but it's more lenient than other Rabbanans. Rashi says it's based on, but Rava says other places that Rov Amor is Ma'asrun that really you could trust that they were Ma'aser because most Amayoras in those times did tithe. So it's more lenient than other Rabbanans.
How is Demai different than Suffolk? I thought Demai is a Suffolk.
Demai is a Suffolk. That's what the Gemara is pointing out. That there's only a Suffolk over here. This institution of the Rabbanan is based on a Suffolk. Yes, because other things that are, there might be other cases which I would say it's more lenient. Rabbi will say it's not more lenient. Only the Mai is more lenient, not because it's a suffix. Rashi says over here because Rov Amoris Masramain.
Well, because most of them do.
Right, so there's a big road, there's a road to rely on, so
Even though
it's,
it's called
it's
the
more,
line.
it's more than just a suffix, it's more lenient than a suffix. It isn't 50-50. It's 80-20. It's a rove Amoris Masramain, so this, even though,
And
they're-
yet, so
go ahead.
Demai is on everybody, on every.
Every
Amor,
Amorit,
So you're
but-
saying that there are gonna be 80%.
Even
that
though
are
we're gonna
be
say,
Considered Demai. even
no,
though they're
no,
doing the nice thing.
every demise is demise, but even though, but it's a very,
Demai means we don't know if the Amors did it. They were
right.
saying Rove did, why don't we go with the Rove?
right, because Rabbanan said, don't trust, you're right, the Rabbanan said, don't trust the road. They were
Here, don't trust the road.
extra precautious. According to the regular klalim, you're not to trust the road. But the rice, even with Rabbanan also, they wouldn't have usually made it Rabbanan on this, but they made it Rabbanan anyway. That's like a very, very, very big precaution.
So that's why Rav is saying.
That's
in
why
this
they make a law
case,
of this case. But other suffix to the Brayim, it could be other Rabbanans that are
We
made
won't
because
be
of a
so
suffix.
much.
Let's say Yantav Sheni. That's what they talk about. Yantav Sheni. Yantav Sheni. It's a Rabbanan because of a suffix.
Uh-huh.
Is that lenient like the Mai? Abai would say yes. It's the same suffix to the Brayim. It's Rabbanan based on the suffix. But Rabba will say the Mai is more lenient than Yantav Sheni. Something like that.
Why would mine be bothering?
Because Rabba Mos Masrin him. You have this extra thing. So just to sum up what the zoom out what the Gemara said, we're studying Rabbi Yehuda that says there's a way to be mochel, and the way to be mochel is that he writes I'm chayv 200, and she writes back I got 100. But just to waive it, and she's to tell him it's okay, 100 is good enough. Rabbi Yehuda wouldn't allow it, even though usually he does allow a davar sheba mamon to now kayim that you can make a. But here, since it's Rabbanan, they made a reinforcement, and here you can make it tonight. The way you could do it is to write a receipt. I got already 100. That's the way to do it according to Rabbi Yehuda. And
There's
Rabbi
no
Meir,
problem like that people will think she's a widow or some other. It
maybe
doesn't matter.
maybe they'll write it. Well, they write. He's going to write a ksuba of
It's
200.
gonna say Basula, it's gonna say 100.
No, so the Gemara does say that he writes 200. Are you saying if he would have done the other
If they
way?
would have done above that,
Uh-huh.
then how can he write Basula 100?
Mhm.
Oh, maybe that was the. kasha.
Because she was mochel. Because she was mochel. They'll write
Oh,
it because she
right,
was
because she
mochel.
was mochel.
She was mochel. So
That's going against the
that's
Torah.
no good because it's not going against the Torah, but it's taking off the ksuba. She's been mochel the ksuba. So Yehuda says even though usually you could be mochel things that are monetary, but you can't be mochel the ksuba derabana because you have to make a reinforcement. So if she says I was just mochel it, I'm writing 100 because she was mochel it. So Yehuda will say it's no good.
Okay.
If you want to be mochel it, the way to do it is to write 200 and then she'll write back a receipt, either a built-in receipt or
built-in.
external receipt.
Yeah. Okay.
Now the Gemara goes into Rav Meir. Now Rav Meir also we have to talk about two scenarios. Rav Meir says you can't be mochel. Rav Meir says you can't be mochel. You cannot, right?
Uh-huh.
And our Mishnah was extreme. Our Mishnah said even in a case where he's gonna write to her 200, and she'll write back 100, also not good. That's very extreme. Not only does Rav Meir say that you can't be mochel and say you don't have to give me ksuba 200, even if he gave her ksuba 200 and then she writes back, also not good enough. The pshat I'm going to say is based on it says in everyone says to look back on Daf Nun Aleph. There's a Taisvus before on Daf Nun Aleph that goes on our Gemara, and I'll say the pshat, and the Bach points out the Rashi also holds like Taisvus before. The Gemara has a diak that what would a mayor hold in the other scenario? Here our Mishnah is extreme, that even if he wrote her 200 and she wrote back a receipt of 100, also it's not good. Right? That's pretty extreme.
Yeah.
We had two cases before, just to say you don't owe me, or you owe me and I received it.
What does it mean that it's a news? Rabbi Meir says it's a
But
news.
Meir says that's like znas, right? Yeah, you have to have a ksuba. If you don't have a ksuba, it's like znas.
I see.
So the Gemara is going to say, I'm saying with Tosfos, and the Gemara wouldn't have seen it. Tosfos fills us in. There's machlokes over there. Daf Nun Aleph, Tosfos says two Rishonim, but we'll say a pshat that seems to be agreed by Rashi. And there's a diak in the Rameir says the extreme case that even if he would have written 200 and she wrote back 100, also it's not good. How about the other case where she wrote that you don't owe me? She told him you don't owe me at all. You don't owe me in the first place. I waive it to begin with, and he only writes for 100. That surely is not good. That fact that there's a mashmos in the words over here that's surely not good. The Gemara's going to talk about. Why is it surely not good? What's the difference? Why is that surely not good? It has to do with the issue we spoke a second ago
And
That
if
could-
she
could-
wrote it, if she wrote a receipt, that she's mochel.
Even that's not good. Even that's not
Even
good.
that's not good.
What
So
if she
then for
wouldn't have-
Sure, if she just.
If she just says I'm
well-headed.
okay. But the Gemara is going to figure out why is that for sure? Because there's could you be mochel? Is it possible to be mochel something that's coming to her? She's being mochel something that's coming to her. The case that she writes a receipt, it's not really a mechila. She's saying I got it. But even at that, her mayor says it's not good because we want not. The Gemara doesn't say here why it's not good. I'll just speak out what Taisus brings down from someplace else that her mayor wants always that it should be difficult for a husband to divorce his wife, or else it's too easy that something will happen wrong and he'll say goodbye. But this way he always has the hesitation because he has to take out money. So that's why her mayor doesn't want a mechila. He doesn't allow mechila, and even if she did it in a fancy way. Means the other case would have been simple. The other case would have been simpler that it wouldn't have worked. And the Gemara goes out to explain what does that mean. Why would it have been simpler that stam waving it is not good? Kalapoches, the word says kalap. That means even if the way that she said she waved it, it's not by the fancy case of the Mishnah that he gave her 200 and then she says I received 100. Even if she would have lachatchila said you don't have to give me 200, I waive it. That's a feeling. That's the Mishnah is coming to say even that. Alma kasava to know bottle the isla the chivin the amala leslach elamana lo samcha daita bevelo bilas bilasnas. The way, yeah. So I wouldn't have gotten it either, and I got places before. He explains that the words of Rabbi are mashma that there's another case that is also not going to work because he holds to know a bottle. Means, what do you say? Which is more of a problem, which is less of a problem? They made this condition. Whatever the condition they made, however they worked it out, that he's not going to give her the ksuba. There are two options, two ways to talk about it. They made up this condition that I'm not going to pay the ksuba, and it's binding. It means that he really doesn't have to give a ksuba. That's one scenario. What?
I'm sorry,
Without the words, just outside for us.
Okay.
If they made a condition, they made a deal, and it legally it works. It works means that he doesn't owe her ksuba.
He doesn't work.
That's one scenario. Another scenario is they made a deal, but the deal legally doesn't go. He does owe her ksuba. Which one is more of a chiddush that Rav Meir will say we're not going to allow it?
The one where it's legal.
The one where it's legal, because then he really doesn't know her ksuba. So right, very good. Even when it legally does work, that he doesn't owe her ksuba. So he says you don't owe her ksuba. I can't allow marriage without a ksuba. How about if legally it does not work, and he does owe her a ksuba? So we tell Rav Meir, we look at, is that a problem? He really does owe ksubas. Then why are you against that? If they made a deal,
if it didn't work,
so it didn't work. So let him be married. Why is it bilas nus? So the Gemara says it's mashma the Mishnah. Even in the case where it doesn't work, and he does owe her ksuba, still Rav Meir says it's not good. Why is it not good? It's a good marriage. That he's chayver ksuba, because since he says I'm not going to give you ksuba, even though in court she can go to court and she can fight it, and he's going to have to pay ksuba, but she doesn't have smichas das. She's not calm about getting the ksuba. Therefore, Rav Meir says also, I don't want such a marriage. I want a marriage where it is binding in a way that she feels that is binding. That's what the Gemara seems to say.
she won't have smichas das if legally the ketubah works.
Even if legally the ksuba works, since he says he's not going to give it, or he thinks that he's put there, she doesn't feel comfortable about it. She thinks he's not going to give it. That also we don't want. We want that it should be binding. Everybody should know about it. Everybody should know. Everybody should feel comfortable about it. That's what the Gemara is saying. Like not only in the case where it's not legally binding. How does it go? The other way. Even where it is legally binding, and you said it before. Even when it's legally binding, and that means that he really is not chayiv ksuba, but Meir doesn't allow such a marriage because he's not chayiv ksuba. I need a marriage where he's chayiv ksuba, even if it's not legally binding and the condition. And if he really is chayiv ksuba, but Meir is also going to say I don't want such a marriage because she's not comfortable with it. Afilu b'tanoah, even if they made a condition and what does it mean? The fact that it's an even ketano batal the isla that Rav Meir holds that such a kind of condition does not work. if the condition doesn't work, so she does get ksuba.
There is a condition and. the
No,
ksuba
to know
does work.
batal means that the condition is nullified. It's a nullified
The
condition.
condition is nullified.
And therefore Islam means she does get ksuba. He made a condition that I shouldn't be chayiv
So she
ksuba.
gets the ksuba.
And she gets the ksuba, but still, even the Amar Leslach, since he tells her you're not going to get ksuba, he says, he writes, I'm going to give you only ksuba of 100. So, Elamana, I'm not going to give you, Amar Leslach Elamana. The husband writes in the ksuba, you only have 100. And you said so. The woman said, but still, lo samcha daita, she doesn't have, what's the word, smichas das? She doesn't feel comfortable about it. She doesn't feel, she doesn't trust it. She doesn't lean on it. That's also considered bilasness because even though technically she does get ksuba, but she doesn't think so. That's also what the mayor will hold. And the Gemara sees all this in the words that he says not only in the case where they did a deal which really is binding, but that was the case where she said, I received it already. He gives her a ksuba of 200 and she says that I received it. Even that case, the mayor says that case surely the mayor says is not going to be a good marriage because he really does not owe her ksuba. But even in a case where he does legally owe her ksuba because the condition didn't work, still, since he doesn't feel comfortable about it, it's also bilasness. And now the Gemara goes into that. Is that true? What would a mayor hold if she says, I waived the ksuba? So we go back to Amar Aleph. There's machlokas before by Sher Ksus V'Ona. Could she waive it? They get married. The husband says, I'm marrying you on the condition I have no obligations. So if Meir says nothing doing, you have all the obligations. And Rav Yehuda says you can get out of the monetary obligations. You can't get out of the owner obligation. But anyway, the Gemara is going to be Medaikar Meir that he only said that on the Raisa you can't make deals on the Raisa. Vashamina later of Meir, Dama Kol Masa Mashkasa B'Torah. To know batal. If you make a condition on something which is written in the Torah, then it's not a good condition. But if it will be Rabbanan, Rav Meir's mashma Rabbanan to know kaya, and if it was only Rabbanan, so this condition would yes have worked. Means the mishmas of our Mishnah would be that if they made a condition not to give ksuba, it does not work, and that's why Rav Meir had to say a chiddush that even though the condition doesn't work and she gets ksuba, but she's not so machdas. But the Gemara's kash is that since Rav Meir holds only by the Raisa, you can't fool around with the Raisas. But on the Rabbanan, you could make a condition. So it's the same thing. There's no difference in the scenarios. If she wrote, I received already 100, or she writes, you don't have to give me 100. Both of them are the same thing, that he does not have to give her. Did I get it? Was it explained? The Gemara sees a chiddush in the case where to know batal, that the condition didn't work. And even though they made up, she's not going to get ksuba, she does get ksuba, Isla, she does get ksuba, but she doesn't feel comfortable about it.
Yeah.
But that was asking, Rav Meir, you don't hold like that. You hold that if she would have made a condition that you don't have to give me ksuba, he doesn't have to give her ksuba. It's legally binding. Because even Rav Meir that says you can make a condition against the Torah, it's only against the Torah, but against Rabbanan, you can make a condition. And ksuba is Rabbanan. And if ksuba is Rabbanan, so then the condition would work, and he doesn't have to give a ksuba, and that's just as simple as the case where she wrote, I received already. There's no difference by writing, I received it, or you don't have to give it to me. Because even if he said both cases, he doesn't have to give it to her. The Gemara wanted to see a chiddush, even in a case where the Tanai is batal and he does have to give it a ksuba, also Rav Meir says it's not a good marriage. But you don't see that, because in the case of ksuba, which is only Rabbanan, Rav Meir should also hold that Tanai is kayam, not that the Tanai does take effect, and he doesn't have to give a ksuba. Lesla, he doesn't have to give a ksuba, so you don't have this special chiddush. My answer is Kesuvos Rav Meir ksuba deraisa. There wasn't a chokes if ksuba was deraisa Rabbanan. There were those that said that as deraisa because it says Kimora Basulos over there by Mefate. There was a Russian to say that maybe ksuba was deraisa. We all ksuba Rabbanan, I think. But if you hold ksuba deraisa, so then everything fits. That Rav Meir will say that you cannot make such a condition. And if therefore he does owe a ksuba, and therefore there's a chiddush, even though he owes a ksuba, it's still not a good marriage because she doesn't think so. So that was that sugya, based on Tosfos and Machmir knowledge. If that's good, we continue by the two dots, and the Gemara is going to bring again Rav Meir, Rav Yehuda we had already, and it's going to stick in Rav Yossi also. There's a new shita, Tanya. So everything else till but next 7-8 lines is all going to be the same,
That's
except.
all really. If he says that whatever, then it's still marriage.
So we pass like a mayor. We pass like a mayor. I think that we want it to be difficult. We want it to be difficult to divorce. So he has to give a ksuba He has to give a ksuba.
So if he says that.
Even if he makes a condition, then it says like it's a bilas nus. Okay, I'm not sure. It means he doesn't want. Ray doesn't allow such a thing. You have to. There are no conditions, and she has to have smichas. The Agmar says she has to have smichas das also. Even if she really does get ksuba, she has to know about it. She has to know that.
The guy can't say it.
Right. So he yells at ksuba even if he says almanah shein ksuba, and even if he did the fancy way of whichever is a chiddush, if he makes the fancy way that she says I received it already, also not good. You have to have the
Today,
ksuba.
you have to write a ksuba.
Yes, and even if you don't, it's still obligating. It's obligating. It's binding.
But I thought you can't live without a ksuba. A husband and wife can't live in the house without, if they don't have a ksuba, no.
So what are you asking?
So if, let's say they don't write it up, so then how can they live together?
Yes, you're right. They do have to. I'm not sure. I missed something. They have to write a ksuba. If someone makes conditions that they shouldn't be having ksuba doesn't work, they still have to have a ksuba. Okay. Now this Bryce is going to say so far what we know. Rab Meir, here's Rab Meir, and here's Rab Yehuda.
You
But
mentioned that, okay. Could you invite over a zug? Don't need. You don't have a suba, you can't invite a suba.
Because you're helping them to do an avera by helping out a marriage which is not going to be a legal marriage, helping them to live as husband and wife in a way
Oh,
that
they'll probably stay home and live together. anyhow.
it's not making it worse.
What about like the parents of Balei Tshuva? There's no.
So they were
question.
not. So
And
what's
they
the question?
didn't- Let's
They
say they
didn't,
didn't have a ketubah.
or they didn't do a legal marriage. They did a civil marriage. That's also you have that also, right? They didn't
Or
have
they have
a.
a civil marriage, right?
so-
But there's bia there, so.
Right,
they have
so
children, so
So the
So
child
they're
is not
married,
a child is not a mamzer or anything, as long as they're not related. The kids. So they had the child without a union of a marriage.
the rabbis would say they need a ketubah.
Yeah.
Is there enough
Oh,
community?
if they need a ketubah, they need a marriage. They have to be. That the question was
I
were
heard
they
a story
married?
recently.
I thought that bia is a way of.
A
being
marriage,
married. So,
uh-huh.
I mean, is there any nafkamina?
Well, I thought they didn't have Adim or whatever.
It means even
Yeah,
if
but they had bia.
but the beer when they live as a husband and wife in a home, that's like a non-sadi. Is that?
No, they have
Ah,
adim,
good.
that they've lived together for 20 years.
Yeah, everybody knows that they live as husband and wife.
Yeah.
So is that good to be enough to be a marriage deraisa?
That
It's a
That the Rosh Hashanah was good enough,
Yeah, like reform, he said that.
not because of the reform, because they're living as a husband and
Yeah.
wife, and everybody knows about it. So that's like a kedushin deraisa. That's what you're saying.
That's what Rav Hankins said.
And Moshe said that.
what?
This question you're asking is to consider the marriage of everybody if they're living together as husband and wife, and everybody knows about it. Is that enough to be considered a marriage deraisa?
That's my focus.
That's what I'm hearing now. And the question will be, what's relevant is if they need a get when they divorce, when they separate, they divorce. They had a civil divorce. A civil divorce is surely not a divorce. That's for sure. The marriage might be a marriage because everybody knows they're living together as husband and wife. You need to aid them. So, but the divorce has to be a divorce. So that's a problem with if Bali Tshuva, if their parents, if the mother was married before and divorced without a real divorce, was the first marriage, and then he's born of a second marriage.
I see.
He's born of a second marriage. Is that considered that she's a married woman that is living with another man? That's the
That's
question.
the question.
Okay, and the answer I don't know. He's saying it's machlokes. So now the Gemara is going to bring a brisa, same thing we had so far with Rabbi Yehuda, but there's the Rabbi Yossi, which is going to be news.
This is a price of including Rabbi Yosef.
Right. It's going to be Rabbi Yehuda, which we had already in the Mishnah, plus Rabbi Yossi, which we didn't have. Tanya Rabbi Omer kol hapochas lebasulim b'masayim u'almana reza bilas. Notice word for word in Mishnah that if they make some kind of a deal in a way that the man is not going to be chayiv 200 ksubas, so it's like bilas nus. And have you done a second? Rabbi Yossi Omer Rasha, you may make a deal in a way that he's not going to be chayiv ksuba. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, back to the Mishnah, so to speak. What's the cost of the Bsula Shtashal Masayim v Kesuvos Los Kabalti Mech Numcha Mana? Well, Mana v Kesuvos. This is the brisa, but it's the same word for the Mishnah also. The only chiddush we have in this is Rabbi Yossi, the 4 words of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yehuda says you can't just do a mechila, like we said before. Rabbi Yehuda himself says only if you do this fancy thing. But since that's what Chazar over again, the Gemara we learned that since according to Rabbi Yehuda, Ksuba is Rabbanan, so they reinforced it and they said you can't just be mochel. If the woman's going to say I'm mochel you, just give me 100 is good enough. So Rabbi Yehuda says not good enough because they reinforced it, and even though usually Davash have a moment to know Kayam, you can make a condition on a monetary issue, but here you can't, and therefore he would be chayiv 200. But if you do it a fancy way about making it that she says, I received it already, that you could do. That's what Abuda says. He writes 200 and she writes back, I wrote to you, I gave you, I got already 100. Or for our money, he writes, I owe you 100. And she writes back, I got 50. That's the end of the brisa, and it's all repeated. But we have Rabbi Yossi as a chiddush. Rabbi Yossi says that you can even do the simple way. That she says, not to give me a ksuba of 100 alone. That's good enough. That's what the Gemara is not talking about. There's Rabbi Yossi Rashai. Rabbi Yossi holds you may do such a thing. Vereminu. And the Gemara is going to ask, bring a brisa and explain it until it comes to till the bottom of the page. That's going to be a kasha. Vereminu, a kasha from a brisa. Ain't no sing ksuvos isha metaltalin. They take an olam. Tanakama says you can't designate metaltalin to become chai for the ksuba. That he puts aside 200 zuz worth of portables, movables, and he says, this is your, if I have to pay ksuba, this is what I'm going to pay you from. This is the money which is designated for your ksuba. And why can't you do that? If they take an olam, because takana. What's takana? So it might get lost. Might get stolen, might get lost, and there's not going to be a ksuba to pay from. So don't designate anything specifically, only karka. Maybe kaki you could designate. Rabbi Yossi says, what kind of a takana is this? It doesn't help anything out by just saying that it's not set price, means the price doesn't stay stable, and it might depreciate. It might come worth less. That's the end of the price, and the words don't make sense. Tanakama says you may not. Rabbi Yossi also says you may not. So there's no machlokas. Everybody says you may not. Tanakama says there's a tikkun olam, and Rabbi Yossi also says that. So it seems to be the same thing, that it's going to be depreciate. So the Gemara says that's the most kasha. Tanakama nami yenosin kamar. What does Rabbi Yossi want from Tanakama? Tanakama also says you may not. The Raisa must mean the following: Tanakama says you may not because it might get stolen or lost, and therefore it's only a problem if he did not accept upon himself the guarantee. He doesn't guarantee it. But if he guarantees it, means he's responsible if it gets stolen or lost. So then he's going to be ksuba for something else. Tanakama will say that's fine. I'm only concerned if he's going to say that this is the ksuba and nothing else. Then the Tanakama is concerned that might get stolen or lost, and she's not going to have any ksuba. So since that's the reason of the Tanakama, so then if he guaranteed it, that even if it gets stolen or lost, I'll pay for something else, then it's okay. But on that, Rabbi Yossi come to say it's not good enough. Even if he accepted upon himself a guarantee to guarantee, it's also not good enough. Even if it's still here, even if it's around, the price might go down, and it's not going to be the same value that it was originally. That's the end of the brisa with the explanation. And now the Gemara is going to bring out the kasha that's bothering him. Over there, at the time that they made the deal, it was worth 200. Rabbi Yossi says it's not good because it might go down, it might devalue, it might become less than 200. And Rabbi Yossi says it's not a good ksuba. So over here, that she's telling right away that I'm ochel you 100, it definitely is less than 200. How come Rabbi Yossi is not worried? Means if you say that she can be mochel, the kasha seems to be if Rabbi Yossi holds yes, she can be mochel if she wants to. So over there, it's not any worse. If she says that she accepts that this metaltalin, these movables, these metaltalin, I'll accept for my ksuba. Right now it's 200. It might depreciate, but she accepts it. So she's mochel. If she's saying that I'm going to accept this for my ksuba, even though she knows that it might depreciate, so that means that she's being mochel.
I'm sorry, we're saying the vada is what?
It's definitely going to. If she's
Go down.
in the case of our case, it definitely went down because she said I'm mochel you 100. She said right away before they started. Here it's surely less than 200 because she said I'm ochel you 100. So surely it should be a problem. It means just turn it away the opposite. If by us you see that she could be mochel even a vadai the evaluation. She says you don't for 200. So over there right now it's 200. It might depreciate, and Rabbi Yossi over there is worried. If he owes you a lot of mochel the ksuba, so there's no problem. She can be mochel if she wants to. If she accepts that these metaltalin as being the ksuba, that's saying that even if it gets worth less, it'll be okay. So she could do that. The more answers, she doesn't realize. What's the comparison? Yeah, she doesn't realize it. She that's the 200. She thinks that this is going to be low on. She doesn't realize that things depreciate sometimes. Deflation. She doesn't realize that it gets worth less. So therefore, when it gets worth less, she didn't realize it. So she wasn't mochel. Over here, she knows right away. She says, "You don't have to give me 200. You can give me 100." She knows that this only she's being more for 100, so she knows about it. So that's okay. If she consciously does it, she has the ability to. But over there, with Choshe, that she didn't realize what she's doing. She didn't realize that it's going to go down the value. But there, she says that's not a good ksuba. Yashikov.
So last night, Chaim David asked me.
Yeah, Chaim David's on the thing. Tell him that.
Oh, yeah, Chaim David. So I was going to ask.
Chaim David.
Last night.
Chaim
Chaim
David?
David gave me